everyone, and welcome to this WISE 2021 panel on fostering emotional intelligence in an era of educator burnout. My name is Dominic Register. I'm a program director at Salzburg Global Seminar. Welcome to everyone who's with us in the studio and everyone who's following this session online. If you are following online or you'd like to contribute to the conversation either during or after this discussion, then please do so on Twitter using the hashtags either WISE Summit, hashtag WISE Summit, or hashtag mental health, and it will help the WISE team coordinate the conversation and keep track of all the ideas and contributions that come from the online and in-person audience. So we are really lucky to have two amazing educators with us today to help us unpick this topic of emotional intelligence in the current era. We have Dr. Zarmina Hotaki, who's the principal of the Qatar Leadership Academy, one of the Qatar Foundation schools, and we have Dr. Mark Brackett, who is the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and professor in the Child Study Center at the Yale School of Medicine at Yale University. So welcome to you both. Thank you very much for being here today and sharing your expertise. Mark, I wonder if we could start with you, and a kind of obvious opening question, but what is emotional intelligence and why is it important in education?
All right, so hi everyone. We define emotional intelligence as the ability to use our emotions wisely. And so that's the broadest definition. Now, to get more granular, our model is called RULER, which is an acronym for the 5 skills of recognizing emotions in ourselves and others, understanding their causes and consequences, labeling them with precise words, knowing how and when to express emotions, including the role of culture, and finally, the big skill of emotion regulation.
And tell us a bit more about RULER. So that's a program that you've designed and developed in
Yeah.
the US or internationally?
We're in 27 countries, about 3,500 schools, reached over 4 million children. And RULER is an acronym for the skills, but it's also the name of our approach to social and emotional learning. And I think, for this group, what I've learned in my 25 years of doing this work is that we all want to help kids. I mean, that's our goal. We want children to develop the skills they need to navigate their lives, to have good health, to make good relationships, to have well-being, achieve their dreams. But we fail to recognize that the adults who are raising and teaching kids have not had an emotion education. And so essentially what I've learned over the years is we really need to take a systemic approach, meaning that the systems that surround children, the leaders, their teachers, the school staff, the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, the administration, everyone needs an emotion education so they can be the best possible role models for children. And so that's been our model now, and it's been we've been very successful.
So RULER is primarily a sort of teacher training approach.
We use a trainer of the trainer model.
Right.
It's a 3-year commitment because we're not the train and hope model. We're the train and let's get married model. And we mean that seriously. We want people to become part of the RULER family because a workshop is not going to change anyone's life. You need really, these are skills that are actually in many ways more complex to develop than traditional cognitive skills. Think about the pandemic. We all had emotions during the pandemic. I, for one, thought, Mark, you can get through this. And 1 month into the pandemic, living with my family and my mother-in-law, I realized, Mark, you need help to get through this. And here I was like an expert in this space. And so for us, what's most important is that schools take seriously the kind of the long run for this. If you want to have long-term, high-quality results that have sustainability, then this work needs to be integrated into the way leaders lead, teachers teach, students learn forever.
Zarmina, you're in a really, I think, fairly unique position in that you have been the leader of 2 different schools in different countries at different points in the pandemic, because in 2020 you were working in DC or Virginia?
DC.
In DC, and then you moved to Qatar. So, the pandemic has been a period of particularly high stress for teachers. Many more responsibilities were placed on schools and educators. And I wondered if, you've seen different coping strategies or different mechanisms for managing stress and managing emotional well-being in the 2 institutions that you've led.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to focus on my DC experience only because I was there when the pandemic first hit. And I found that we were sort of at a fork in the road. Pre-COVID, schools made the decision very haphazard. We're going to focus on emotional intelligence. We're going to focus on well-being. We're not. Is it a priority? It's not. And when COVID hit, it really brought schools to their knees. And we realized in DC, in our school, if the population is high risk, that if we did not focus on the well-being and emotional intelligence and resilience of our teachers, they weren't going to be able to teach. So with that, we decided to help support our teachers. Like every year, we created a PD schedule. And like most schools, even here in Qatar, you have that one day where it's half a day, students leave, and teachers do professional development. You have a chunk of time. And so we had 20 sessions, and we sat as a senior leadership team, and we said, with these 20 sessions, we decided to prioritize 1 through 20 what was important. And then we took 11 to 20 and we scratched it. And we put in what we call the Human First Initiative, where our focus was on the well-being of our teachers. And we did things like restorative practices, restorative circles, storytelling sessions, yoga, or we just let our teachers go home, get coffee and go home and rest. And so we found that we modeled effective coping strategies for our teachers in the school environment so that they could use those same strategies outside of the school environment. And it made a huge difference because that year, and again, it was a overage, under-accredited school, very high risk, we had no turnover.
That's amazing. Because, there's been there's a lot of discussion at the moment about the Great Resignation affecting the teaching profession in particular and people leaving. So,
Right. And I think when teachers saw that there's 20 sessions of professional development, and out of those 20, 10 are only actual PD where you're focusing on assessments, content, curriculum, the other 10 are all about their well-being, they felt cared for, and it made a difference.
and as the principal of the school, did you have the autonomy to kind of make all those decisions, or were you doing it within, guidance from the school district, or were you unique?
Well, we were a charter school. We were a charter school, and so we decided as a leadership team we were going to do that as a senior leadership team. But when we brought this down to our curriculum coordinators and assistant principals, who are really in charge and held accountable for the deliverables of these PD sessions, they were shocked. You've taken 10 sessions away. How are we going to meet accreditation needs? How are we going to do this? And it was shifting that mindset that instead of having 3 sessions on assessment, you have 1, and you better make it impactful.
And did you run up against any cynicism from the teachers who were kind of questioning whether this was, at this time of great crisis and stress, whether this was the optimum use of PD time, or was
They were
everyone
so grateful.
really? That's
They were so
fantastic.
incredibly grateful.
And having now moved to Qatar, do you find, are there cultural differences in education intelligence approaches and strategies, or?
I do think there are cultural differences, and I think that Qatar has an advantage. And one of the advantages is that it is a community. It is, in terms of it's very tribal, extended family, it naturally builds community. And so that makes it a lot easier when you're working with emotional intelligence or resilience, because they don't necessarily believe that we believe, or here in Qatar, we believe that emotions are not just innate. We can develop and cultivate them. They're not just, you have resilience or you don't. So good luck if you don't have it, you're short. So that makes a huge difference. That's an absolute advantage because it's just within the culture.
And Mark, you said Ruler is running in 26 different countries?
27,
20, sorry.
plus or minus.
Since we started this
Yeah,
session.
there you go. One dropped out.
So are you, the same question, do you find that there are certain cultural similarities and differences with how individuals engage with emotional intelligence?
There are. We have to be mindful that our emotion system, just like our cognitive system, is embedded in the culture that we develop in. And so, I think in the United States, where we have many cultures coming together, the dominant culture, believes that they're right about everything. And so, for example, we know there is racial bias in the perception of emotion. And we need to make people aware of that because they're overestimating negative emotions in people, which is an injustice at best. And I think the second, when you think about all the skills of emotional intelligence, reading emotions, understanding, labeling, expressing, regulating, every one of them has a cultural component. The words that we use to describe emotions, there are words in certain cultures that we don't have in English, and vice versa. The largest cultural difference, though, really is in the expression of emotion. The rules that we have in our societies around who gets to express emotions, when we express emotions, simplest things from how we greet people to eye gaze to do we talk about our sadness and depressions. And so what I think is most important for people to understand is that most emotions, whether we have words for them or not, are universal. But our culture, our backgrounds dictate, how much of those emotions that we share.
And the 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 pandemic has created conditions where there is a lot more attention being paid to well-being and to educator burnout. So would you, without wanting to kind of capitalize on the collective trauma that everyone has experienced, do you think that there is an opportunity that our experiences over the last 20 or so months will be a catalyst for embedding more emotional intelligence approaches in schools?
I would say definitely. And so I remember in March of 2020, we had our ruler conference at Yale. It was an in-person conference. There was one person there wearing a mask, and we were all looking at that person like, what's going on? Because it was right in the beginning of the pandemic. Then the world shut down 2 weeks later, and then the university closed down a few weeks after that, and I was sitting with my team thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to our center? Everyone's working from home, and our school's going to be prepared to do, are we going to get more schools to come through our ruler training? And I would say in the last 2 years, we've trained more schools than we have ever. So this year, I know I'm a little nervous about this when I take my red eye home tonight, and I have 900 new participants starting ruler training 2:00 p.m. on Friday that I'm opening for. And so this year alone, we have a prediction that we'll train over 700 more new schools.
Wow. And that's more or less globally, or is that?
Yeah, we launched Ruler in Central and South America just about 2 months ago, in Bolivia and Chile and Argentina and Panama. We're actually going to be working in Qatar very soon. We're starting with 10 schools, which I'm excited about. And if you're interested, let us know. And so we're building a whole center for emotional intelligence in China. We have schools in Spain, in Italy, Australia, literally. There's global interest in this now.
That's really encouraging, isn't it? Because it feels like emotional intelligence has been spoken about for a long time in education, but it has very often been the next thing that needs to be done rather than the priority.
Yeah, I think the largest, talking about barriers to the work, first one is like you have to have fantastic leaders, right? If you don't have a good leader, it never works. It just never works because the leader has to either create the time for the professional development or the accountability for the work being implemented. And if that doesn't happen, it just always gets pushed to the side because of other priorities, math, science, language arts, etc. But I feel kind of just blown away, honestly, by that this crisis has created an opportunity, I think, for people to start taking seriously, children's and adults' emotional development.
And that it needs to be modeled by the leadership in the school.
It has to be. I mean, I think, I actually forgot what I was going to say a minute ago. What I really wanted to say, in addition to what I just said, is that one of the challenges that I've seen, and I think most educational leaders would agree, they won't agree in the same way that I'm going to say it, is that we get very hungry and excited about new things, right? A new book comes out by some author, and it's like, this is the new important thing, and then it's another thing, and it's like, no, it's mindfulness, no, it's grit, no, it's growth mindset, no, it's I statements, and like people just get obsessed with like the new workshop to get their teachers trained in this new thing. And I think, honestly, that's problematic. And the reason why I say that is that just the work on emotion perception alone, it's a life's journey. The work on emotion regulation, as we all know, it is really hard to learn strategies to support ourselves and children in managing the full range of emotions. And some people are like, what's the best strategy? Oh, it's breathing. Okay, everybody breathe. Like, wait a minute. Everybody breathes anyway. So, like, let's learn some other strategies and let's help children find the ones that work best for them. And so, anyway, my hope and prayers are that people go deeper and not continuously wider.
I think that kind of wider point about initiative fatigue in education is something that I imagine so many you have to be particularly alert to as a school leader, that there are, as Mark was just saying, so many new initiatives which are pushed towards teachers. And how do you have you found that you've needed to make the case for prioritizing this above other things?
You're absolutely right. And, I remember 15, 16 years ago having the conversation about emotional intelligence and social emotional needs of students and the responsibility teachers have in the classroom, and the conversation around, I am a content teacher. I teach physics. I teach chemistry. Why are you talking to me about the social emotional intelligence or needs of kids? That's not my area of expertise. And so moving away from that, because it was considered the new thing, the new shiny thing. And I'm really proud to say that many schools, even here in Qatar, we have wellness coaches. These positions weren't even available 15, 16 years ago. And we're moving from a model of you're no longer a content teacher, you are a teacher of learning. And under that umbrella is the social emotional aspect. And I feel like we're in the same place now with teachers. And I don't think it's going to take as long as it did with children, because we have no choice. COVID has forced us to move much faster and to prioritize, because I have worked with burned out teachers, and it's really gut wrenching. It really affects the entire community, students, parents, other teachers. It's really hard to see. And if we don't prioritize and we don't support and help these teachers, some of them and many of them are leaving, but some of them are staying and they're not doing well. And we all know that teachers who have high emotional intelligence motivate students. They are much more effective in the classroom. They create safe spaces. And so knowing all of this, when you look at the cost benefit analysis, is can you include it and prioritize it in your budget? I don't think we have a choice.
Yeah, there's that. It's not just the smart thing to do; it's the right thing to do. And the fact that it is. So I suppose from a strategic point of view, if you're trying to convince either the teachers in your school or people in the Ministry of Education to position this kind of training as absolutely foundational for improving multiple number of other school standards and education outcomes.
Right, right. And it's absolutely necessary. We got a lot of COVID money. A lot of the public schools and charter schools in the U.S. got a lot of COVID money from the government. And so we considered this all free money in terms of like now we can do a lot of things with it. And we hired a wellness coach to support not our students, but our teachers. The difficulty of getting this through in terms of where does this fall in the budget? Is it a resource? Is it human capital? Where is it? Because we've never done it before. It's not an area that's in our budgets. It's not an area that we talk about. And so many of us were confused. I'm not exactly sure where this falls because, the government monitors all of our spending in charter schools. So we were all scratching our heads like, what do we do with this? And so, but I think that that's changing. And I'm happy to say that that's changing.
And what was the solution that you found there?
We
Where
considered it human capital.
Right.
Human capital, yeah.
So because the risk is because it falls across or it cuts
Right,
across different
right.
budget streams. It's neither. It doesn't belong in any.
Absolutely, and we took it out of what we call the school support budget. So not student support; it was school support, meaning across everything in the school.
And Mark, with the ruler training, do you the teacher is the main focus, or it's the trainer of trainers, but do you also run sessions for policymakers and people who control education budgets at a regional or national level?
We do. So actually, Ruler mostly starts with the superintendent in the United States. And so we have a summer institute for superintendents and their cabinet. For example, the people, the directors of instruction, directors of HR, the directors of people personnel.
Right.
And we find that it really makes a difference. As a matter of fact, we did some analysis over the last couple of years and found that we have a 95% adoption rate of Ruler in districts when the superintendent and that team goes through training, which is pretty amazing. And in the state of Connecticut, where I live, 50% of the schools have gone through all the training. All the superintendents have, and over the last 10 years, we have an 87% retention rate of schools continuing to do the work, which is remarkable, really, and from the standpoint of any kind of approach being, brought to a school.
So 50% of schools in Connecticut.
Correct. Yeah.
And do you have an aspiration? Do you think 100%?
I mean, you'll never get 100%, but I have this audacious goal of making Connecticut the first emotionally intelligent state,
Right.
and so, I'm not going to sleep until 90%, and it's really happening. I think if we're thinking about going from a school to a district to a community to a county to a state, what I've learned over the last many years is in the state of Connecticut, and people are trying to replicate this now. Utah wants to be the second emotionally intelligent state, and now Washington State just actually emailed me today. We want to be the third emotionally intelligent state, which is very exciting. But it really takes getting every stakeholder involved. So the commissioner of education of the state, the superintendent's association president, the teachers' unions in the United States. We've created a model where every single stakeholder that is involved in the education of children and adults goes through our training. And that way there's a common language, not only at a local level, but at an entire state level.
And, is there opposition from, I know with some of the kind of social and emotional learning literature in the US, there's been quite significant pushback from different political factions. And
there is.
You're running up against that as well?
That's why I have a martial arts background. Just eliminate all those people. Now, that's not very emotionally intelligent, right? But, there is some part of me that does have that thought. I have to be honest. I think we are very fortunate. And the reason why we as a center are fortunate is that we really focus on the underlying critical emotional and social skills that children need. And if you explain this work well, and in a way that helps people to understand what you're doing, not ethereal, because sometimes we in the field, we talk about this as social and emotional learning is everything. It's optimism, it's well-being, it's motivation, it's being creative, it's charisma. I think that's when people say, what? What's going on here? But when you ask any policymaker, did your family struggle with anxiety during the pandemic? Yes. Do you think that your family, your school community might have done a little better? Everyone would have been a little healthier if they had better strategies to support them in managing anxiety. It's very hard to argue against that. Yeah. And so I just feel like the more we can talk about the critical skills that we all need to support our health and wellness and good decision making, the easier it's going to be.
There's an interesting case to be made, isn't there, about the kind of experience of collective trauma as an opportunity for developing empathy across groups where it didn't necessarily previously exist.
Yeah.
So if we could come to you for the final word, if you had a top tip for teachers or for school leaders or for educators who are watching this or listening for developing or practicing their own emotional intelligence from all of your experience, what would be your number one recommendation?
I would reiterate what Mark had mentioned, moving from big conceptual ideas to very concrete, practical things we can do in the school, because emotional intelligence is a big conceptual idea. And so, but what does that look like in the school? And the expectation for leaders is that we just can't wing it. We need frameworks, we need guidance, we need evidence-based practices that we can use that are not trial and error, because you're dealing with people and their emotions. Trial and error really does not, and teaching is all about trial and error, right? But in this area, I think trial and error can be really detrimental. So I think the clear defined frameworks would be incredibly beneficial, and it would be one tip or recommendation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dr. Samina Hotaki and Dr. Mark Brackett. Thank you ever so much for being
Thank
with
you.
us for this panel today, and thank you everyone in the studio.
Thank you.